Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, you will discover that I have a little series that I used to do called Nostalgia Trips, where I revisit old games or old shows that I used to watch as a little kid or several years ago, and I review them and see if my opinion has changed or if I've discovered something about the show and like why it stuck to me. So yay, I'm back to reviewing shows. I haven't done this in a while, unfortunately, because I just haven't had time. This past year has been so busy, so I haven't had time to binge or to record any audio or anything like that. So I've been doing quick videos rather than commentary videos. And I'm so sorry that it took me so long to get to My Little Pony Season 2. Life just caught up with me and I didn't have the physical or mental time to dedicate myself to watching a show and reviewing a whole season. But now I have time, yay, because I'm pretty much done with school for the year. So I will be continuing to review the rest of the My Little Pony seasons and the Ninjago seasons, and then I'll move on to other shows and make opinion videos about them as well, because that's all fun and dandy. But before I dive into this, if you haven't seen it yet, please watch my review-commentary of season 1 of My Little Pony. If you've already done this, sweet, thank you. But just know that the format of this video is going to be slightly different, mostly for the sake of my sanity, because editing that video was a doozy, but I'll still be comparing my original thoughts from 10-year-old me to 19-year-old me now, though actually I guess technically I'm 20 now because I just turned 20, but that aside, this is a review, kind of like an after I watched podcast style kind of thing, rather than a what I learned then versus now style that I did for season 1. Just to be clear, I might be inserting clips to prove my point or to like refer to something, but this is not a reaction video. This is a review and commentary. Also, spoilers for MLP season 2 and for future seasons, so if you haven't seen all of My Little Pony, this video is not for you. Without further ado, I'm going to start. This video also may be divided into several episodes so that you don't listen to me talk for like 2 hours straight. So, yay. Per usual, season 2 starts out as a premiere, 2 parts, 1 and 2, and it's called The Return of Harmony. And this introduces us to a new and one of the most iconic villains, / characters eventually, in this series. Watching this as a kid, I hated this premiere. I don't know why. Maybe I'll get into that in a little bit. Apologies ahead of time if my opinions are scattered, since instead of binging, I watched this show, this season of the show, over like a longer period of time, so I didn't just straight binge it. So apologies if my commentary is scattered. I should have said that in the intro. But this was a good premiere. I kind of started remembering why I didn't like it though, so I'm gonna get into that. At the beginning, first of all, if you've seen my previous My Little Pony video, you might actually know that I'm not a huge fan of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, at least as of now. So honestly, the intro of this season kind of justifies me almost entirely, because it's their fault that the villain of the season, Discord, gets released in the first place. Also, Scootaloo is right. The character Discord, and his name Discord, specifically is stated to be the Lord of Chaos, so she was right. So I rest my case. I applaud Cheerly for not eating these ponies alive, hence why I can never ever be a teacher, because I have no patience for chaos. However, I'll stop hating on them because honestly, they just introduced a very interesting character, which I will get into later. Oh, also, apparently Princess Celestia says that he's the spirit of disharmony, hence the title, I guess. So I think everyone's just confused at this point, which I guess marks the theme of the episodes. But anyway, I think the introduction to Discord's threat is fantastic because the whole cast is shook. The elements of harmony are just gone suddenly. And from the beginning, Discord is trolling every pony, which is the perfect way to introduce his character, because that's what he's all about. Trolling people, confusion, chaos. Everybody's just a mess. And his threat level is almost immediately shown the way he picks them apart one by one with absolute ease, because Applejack begins lying more than Pinocchio, Pinkie Pie turns into a grumpy lack of laugh, Rarity becomes greedier than a corrupted niffler, Harry Potter reference, and this is to the point where she carries around a giant rock, unable to see that it's not a diamond. Rainbow Dash loses her sense of loyalty, and Fluttershy becomes an absolute jerk. And it's not like they were tricked or manipulated or anything. Discord just straight up hypnotizes them with his visions or sheer power. Because, like, a lot of villains do this thing where they kind of, like, already know that they're gonna win. Discord rigs the game that he has them play, the quote-unquote game, into his favor and just tears the group apart in the process. I compare him to Nightmare Moon, who made for a really interesting pilot, but Discord's threat level is so much more menacing because at the end of this, he wins. He is victorious. He completes his goal. And so now we get into the second part. At this point, Twilight has been outwitted, which is unlike her, and things are in absolute chaos as Discord intends. And although Twilight tries to figure out what's going on, she's unable to keep the group together and thus begins losing herself. I have to give Twilight props. She's better than me, because I would have dished my friends so fast if they started acting like this around me, and the world would then be doomed, hence why I'm not the Princess of Friendship, and I am relieved that this would not happen to me in real life, hopefully. You never know, but hopefully not. Also, Twilight, girl, use your powers! You just let everybody knock you out. What the heck? Well, she held her own, so I'll give her that. But also, how did she think that the friendship ritual elements of harmony thing was gonna work if Rainbow Dash wasn't there? Like, we stand Spike because he's a real one for standing by her this whole time, but, like, even with just the elements, they couldn't take down Discord because they're no longer representing the elements and because Rainbow Dash is not present. Duh. But I guess this is why Discord's brilliant. For the first time in the series, at least as far as I'm seeing things, everyone really does feel hopeless because they've lost. Discord is freaking hilarious, too. I enjoy his character personally and as a villain. I know he's a little bit polarizing within the fandom, but that's just me. Luckily, Twilight gets her mojo back pretty quickly and decides to fight for her friends again, proving that she's way more motivated than I am, though I guess I would have been like that when I was 11, which I guess is a regression, so yikes. But I know that I said in season 1, Twilight was my 6th favorite of the main 6. I don't know if I said this in the first part. Like, I like all of them, but in season 1, I feel like she kind of was at the bottom of my list in terms of favoritism, but right now I'm kind of standing her in this episode. Like, she's great. The way she just kind of, like, tackled AJ, guts. She did what she had to do, and while this whole returning memories theme does get a little bit repetitive in future seasons, I thought it was pretty well done in this case. Don't mind me cackling when Big Mac popped up and just licked Twilight in the face. That gave me a really nice belly laugh. I do wish that everyone else's transitions back to their normal selves were less rushed, but I guess I can let it slide because Fluttershy ends up calling Discord a big dumb meanie and proves that she can fly when she really needs to, foreshadowing. And everyone proves that teamwork is the dream work because that's the show. And boy, do they show Discord. His gag is relatable, but real friendship is definitely worth fighting for no matter how cynical I've been throughout this episode. But while some people, or ponies in this case, may be better getting cut out of your life if they turn sour on you to the extreme, but all friendships will have their ups and downs, and that's just something that's going to happen, and if they're true friendships, they are worth salvaging. I think season 2 of MLP does a great job of showing this to kids. Obviously, it's a little on the nose, but kids are going to fight, and then they're going to make up and cry the next day, because they'll hopefully know that staying angry at each other over smaller things isn't really worth it. I learned this the hard way. Sometimes it does take time to patch up a relationship, but that's okay if the friendship is real and genuine, because if it is, it can be mended. But I do have to say, for an all-powerful Princess, Celestia rarely does anything helpful. Like, when she does something, it's cool, but she kind of just went, oh, yeah, so y'all are gonna fix this, ha ha ha. Like, come on, Celestia, you do better. So now, getting into the regular episodes, we start with episode 3, lesson 0. I remember hating this episode too, because when I was little, I don't know, I just didn't like it all that much, but this time, I'm not quite sure what exactly bugged me about it. I mean, it's probably because Twilight is very much a perfectionist, and that just drives me nuts. Like, I've had people be all like, oh, I got a 98 on a test. I'm so dumb. I'm like, okay, seriously, come on. That's a really good grade. Like, it gives me that kind of vibe, and I hate that. But if things aren't, I'm one of those people, if things aren't efficient and quick, or if I don't get enough icing on my cupcakes, I will be mad. So also, her slowly going insane throughout this episode is really unnerving. Honestly, it's kind of shocking to watch that unfurl. I don't like it. I will say, though, it's kind of a miracle that I do so well in school given my work ethic, unless it comes to theater and writing or some kind of event that's going to boost my career. Don't tell any directors that, or I'll never get hired. But, like, Twilight's taking this to an extreme, and it freaks me out. Also, like, she's just being overall overdramatic, because if you miss a deadline, you get, like, a point off. You get, like, a certain percentage off. You don't get expelled, you don't get locked in a dungeon. This is why I stand Spike, because he keeps his head on straight when he needs to. Twilight should not have been excited about the idea of her friends having problems. That's concerning. I'm remembering why she annoys me sometimes. I feel like I'm either behind her 100% or getting annoyed by her. A lot of these scenes definitely had me thinking and laughing, but long story short, Twilight ends up making a huge mess over nothing and causes everyone to fight over a doll. This is just a lesson that no one's perfect, mistakes are going to be made, and touching base with your authorities is important because likely they will understand. And at this episode, Trollestia strikes again, but Twilight's friends have her back, and taking your friends seriously when they're worried is important, which is proven by Spike, which is making me feel more and more validated for standing him. Incoming, an episode about my favorite MLP character, and Twilight, the fangirl of Star Swirl the Bearded, strikes again. First of all, Twilight, if you give me a book, I'm probably not going to read it. I'm not anti-reading, but I just don't have the attention span to sit down and read a book, unfortunately, because I used to be such a big reader. But second of all, Princess Luna is amazing. But in all seriousness, it is interesting to see her adjusting to the modern world and to her good form, because she does struggle with that in several ways. Twilight is great this episode at trying to help her, and though I do understand ponies being frightened of her, Pinkie Pie was really annoying this episode because, you know, she was there when Luna reformed and even cried about it. Fluttershy did as well, but she's a scaredy cat, so I give her a little slack, but Pinkie Pie did turn out to be mostly joking, and it made for a funny ending, but it was still annoying. And this is why I appreciate AJ a lot in this episode, because at least she tried to help out despite being scared and actually felt bad for Luna. And once Luna begins adjusting her attitude, it helps win over the crowd until Pinkie Pie ruins it and makes Luna freak out and create actual spiders, which definitely would have had me screaming as well, so I don't blame everyone for running away screaming after that. But this is why communications on all sides is super important. Pinkie Pie reveals that she likes being scared in the end, and that the ponies are going to find a way for the kids to have fun and for Princess Luna to fit in well despite the situation, and she becomes a beloved figure of Equestria and the fandom by the end of this episode. We stan Luna is superior to all your all faves, so yeah, she's better. Deal with it. Now, if y'all have watched my season 1 review, you may know that Rarity actually used to be my least favorite of the main 6 by a long shot. And during season 1, she went from last to second place. And I can say that this episode used to have me 100% on Sweetie Belle's side. Like, as a kid, I was like, oh, God, Rarity's such a jerk. And again, just like what happened when I rewatched season 1, I have now learned that I can sympathize with both sides. I think that's what comes with maturing. But as a younger sibling, I can imagine that I was very annoying whenever I visited my siblings in Guatemala, and I would be annoyed too if my younger sibling was messing up all my stuff unintentionally or not. Like, it was really sweet of Sweetie Belle to make a gift for Rarity with those gems, but she shouldn't have taken them in the first place. Just don't touch people's stuff. It's not good. Like, obviously she's a kid, but she should know, she's old enough to know better not to touch people's stuff. Although I do find Rarity quite hypocritical when Sweetie Belle cleans up her room. Like, again, you shouldn't touch your sibling's stuff even if you're trying to be helpful. But Rarity's been all fussy about cleaning, and then when Sweetie Belle helped her clean, she was like so mad. But again, I see both sides, like, don't touch my stuff. Rarity could have handled it worse if people touched my stuff. Yeah, good thing I don't have any younger siblings. Understandably, though, Sweetie Belle is upset when Rarity completely shuts her down, and this causes both of them to jump to conclusions. Rarity refuses to admit that she's too hard on Sweetie Belle, and Sweetie Belle holds a grudge and won't hear Rarity out when she apologizes. Though, admittedly, Rarity still really needs to realize that Sweetie Belle is different than she is, and they need to find a compromise, but it's a good thing that Applejack is there with all the metaphors about apple pie, and Apple Bloom burping and Applejack low-key roasting Rarity will never fail to be rent-free in my head. But all that aside, Applejack and Apple Bloom are able to kind of help get Sweetie Belle and Rarity's relationship back on track, given that they have more experience being around each other and have likely gotten through a bunch of silly scuffles like this, maybe even worse. And another reason why Applejack was my original favorite is how reasonable she can be and how she doesn't jump to conclusions like this and how she's willing to talk through this kind of stuff with everyone else. Like, I'm remembering why she was my favorite by far when I first watched the show. She was a great influence on Sweetie Belle this episode and was the right amount of sisterly and friendly with Apple Bloom. I understand meeting someone who gets you and looking up to them as a result, just like Sweetie Belle ends up looking up to Applejack. Like, even in college, this has happened to me. I've met people and I'm just like, oh my gosh, you're so cool, adopt me. But, like, at the end of the day, we can see each other as friends too. And I'm glad that Rarity and Sweetie Belle eventually end up seeing each other's sides and make an effort towards having a healthier sisterly bond. In the end, your family, whether that be blood family, adopted family, or chosen family, you should always have each other's backs. And even with disagreements that are inevitable, hopefully they can be worked through at the end. And once again, we stand Spike for being the mediator and being unproblematic. Oh boy, another CMC episode. No, not Claremont McKenna if people from my college are watching. Apple Bloom going bowling definitely gave me a giggle, but other than that, I don't really care for this episode. This is another, like, CMCs being way too desperate to get their cutie marks. Understandable, but dumb nonetheless. Sakura is once again a queen, but I do understand being impatient about the whole situation. I am an impatient person. If a line at a dining hall is too long, I'm just like, oh, screw it, I'm getting a salad. Like, I don't like waiting. I'm an impatient person, but in all seriousness, obsessing over something can get to the point where it's unhealthy quite literally, because Apple Bloom literally gets ill trying to get her cutie mark, which is not good. I do have to say Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo were actually pretty tolerable this episode, because they, went out of their way to help out Apple Bloom, and I don't know, they just annoyed me less this episode. Diamond Tiara can get her tiara knocked off of her head, but at the end of the day, the lesson is don't jump to an improbable solution that can end up biting you in the butt. First of all, Opal is aggressive in this episode, even for a cat. Second of all, the song in this episode, like the main song, always gets stuck in my head because it played in a My Little Pony like video game or something. And I can't decide if that's annoying or not. Third of all, I really want to get a turtle or a tortoise, but I should probably wait until I finish college because moving a huge tank around does not seem ideal to me right now. Finally, I will adopt all of the pets in the show that didn't get picked because I would always get really sad for all the ones that didn't end up winning no matter how many times I watched this episode. Or at least I would do that if I had enough money and space, but I don't, so I'll just pretend because I can't adopt those animals anyway. Overall, I like this episode, but it doesn't really contribute to the plot, but it is kind of fun to watch. I do like to see the idea that you shouldn't count things out, even if it doesn't seem appealing at first, because Rainbow Dash ends up making a really good friend that she never thought that she would, and dedication counts for a lot. Since Rainbow Dash learns her lesson in the end, I'll cut her from some little bit of slack for being kind of a jerk this episode, and thus begins the standing of Tank the Tortoise. Okay, honestly, here's an episode that I hated when I was younger. And honestly, I now know why, and I still don't like it. Now, I'll start with Rainbow Dash. She was really annoying this episode because she gets super arrogant and cocky. Like, yeah, that's part of her character, but this is just on a whole nother level. And also, what the fork is up with these ponies getting in all this random peril this episode? That's ridiculous. This is like so much peril, and from what? And then Rainbow Dash ends up hoping that people will be put in danger, or even tries to cause people to get in danger so that she can prove herself. That's like way out of character. And I would understand them putting Rainbow, like, I don't know. I really hated that. And I would understand the main six putting Rainbow in her place if they had called her out directly first, but instead they're just kind of like, oh, I think the mysterious mare is really cool. Like, they just kind of deflect. They never like directly say, Rainbow Dash, you're being cocky, cut it out. Like, they never do that. And then they lie about it, and I just don't feel like that's a very good lesson to take away. So honestly, everybody really annoys me this episode, and this, I think, is definitely my least favorite episode of the season by a pretty solid long shot. Again, if they had just called out Rainbow Dash at the beginning, then all of this could have been avoided. Also, Rarity, Applejack, and Twilight, do not act like you've never been arrogant before. That really bugged me, because they were getting all like, oh, you need to be humble, like at the end of the episode. I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, okay, then you need to do that too. Yeah, I don't really like anything about this episode. I mean, even Spike is kind of annoying this episode, so... Ugh. Lesson: if your friends are being jerks, call them out before things get worse instead of humiliating them and making them feel terrible and being a jerk yourself. I mean, like, if it keeps happening, then maybe they need a taste of their own medicine, but this is not one of those cases because they never had an intervention. So everybody loses cool points for me in this one. That sucks. So let's just pretend that this episode doesn't exist. Dang. I completely forgot about this episode, which is sad because I actually really like this episode. I think it ended up being one of my favorites. So right from the start, I could smell the classicism, I can't English, in this episode. I mean, at the beginning, we meet those two snobby ponies, and since I didn't remember this episode at all, I wasn't sure if Fancy Pants would even acknowledge Rarity had she not said she was staying at the castle. So I was like, ugh, like, I don't know how to feel about this. The only thing I remember about this episode, like, before rewatching it, was that, like, giggle squeal that Rarity does. Yeah, bonus points. But Rarity is proud of her work, but she lies to try to look better in high society and ends up getting caught in a knot as a result. Like, a little fib, sure, but she, like, straight up lies about certain situations, which can really screw you over if people start digging into what you've said and then find out that you're lying. Like, ugh, yeah, not a good move on her part, but a birthday party, also, like, it's Twilight's birthday, right? So, like, ugh, she just gets really caught in a knot when Twilight's birthday, like, she ends up having to miss it to try to go to this very fancy garden party that Fancy Pants is holding or whatever. And then she ends up lying to Twilight again, which is sad. And I felt so bad for the poor pony that's carrying her bags. Like, this is getting crazy. And then her friends end up showing up in Canterlot to celebrate Twilight's birthday, which makes things even more hectic. And then she ends up dumping water on her cat to make her look sick. Like, I feel so bad for Opal. She has the right to be cranky. But in the end, she makes the right decision and owns up to her mistakes and owns her friends, as she should. And the rich snobs at the beginning that end up looking like idiots because Fancy Pants ends up complimenting Rarity and the dress that she made for Twilight's birthday, which is super sweet. So I guess I judged him wrong too. Looks like we can all learn from this. Rarity has once again changed my mind. Again, used to hate her. And while she's made mistakes, she owned up to them in the end, so I give her major respect for that, and I'm really glad that I rewatched this episode because it was a pleasant surprise. Opal was great. I actually really liked her in this episode, so yay. Like, this was, I think, a pleasant surprise for me. I'm really happy that I rewatched this episode. Okay, so that's going to be the end of part 1 of this podcast series thing. I want to keep these videos 30 minutes-ish so that I don't take up too much of y'all's time. But make sure to check out part 2, which will cover episode 10 and beyond. Maybe I'll even do a part 3. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, this is my opinion strictly. Maybe you have a different one. I'd love to hear it in the comments. I'd love to hear if you completely disagree with me or if you definitely agree with me or if your opinions even change like mine. And I'm really excited to continue talking about this season.